In the early years of Ananda's development, the 1970s and 80s, especially the 70s, which was a long time ago in the span of one lifetime, but seems like yesterday, if you're living that span of a lifetime. I was present. I met Swami in 1969. I became part of the community in 1971, and it's been continuous ever since. And Swamiji himself was defining, Swami Kriyananda, for those of you who don't know, direct disciple of Yogananda, was acting on behalf of his guru to establish one of the most important elements of Yogananda's mission to the West, which was to pioneer a new lifestyle. And he called it intentional spiritual communities. He actually called them world brotherhood colonies. But the language is people drawn together for high spiritual ideals who give each other strength in that capacity to live by these principles. You don't have to go more than about 8 feet outside this building, and you realize that there's nothing appalling inherently. There's nothing unrighteous about the world we see around us. It's just they're interested in doing something else. I've never been much for politics since I was part of a small group of people who occupied the administration building at Stanford University to protest the Vietnam War, now that I think about it, and emerged with my pillow. Apparently, it was a good image because it appeared on the front page of the Stanford little paper, which is how my parents found out how I was spending their money. So with that small exception, I very soon after was out of college, not because I graduated, but just because I was done, and found the spiritual path and have been focused in a completely different way. Not because my concern for injustice or human suffering was any less. In fact, it was because it was more. And it was just impossible for me to see in all the chaos. My father, who was a very good father, made it clear to me after about a 3-minute conversation that I didn't have any idea why there was a war and what was going on. I was just, he wasn't very respectful. He was pretty stern. He didn't really care what I was doing, but he thought I ought to be better informed before I did it. Not that he was not in favor even of what I'd done, but he knew that I was caught up in a flow of energy and I was not using my own capabilities. It was an unexamined life. Those would be the words I would use. And in fact, what I was incredibly keen on was learning how to understand why I was here and what I was doing, and how to do it not merely well in the eyes of the world, because I was good at school. In this society at this time, being good at school is supposed to be your ticket to everything. But it was the ticket to nothing that I wanted. And one of the reasons I left college so fast was they had lots of information, they had lots of intelligence, they had lots of skills, none of which I particularly wanted to learn, but they didn't know how to be happy. In other words, they didn't know the basics. And some of my own professors demonstrated to me extraordinary stupidity in the basics of what would make a happy life. Why am I here? What am I doing with these people? And the world around us and this area that we live in, we're incredibly gifted. My personal analysis of this area is this is highly educated, very refined people with a great deal of creativity, a large understanding of magnetism and personal power and discipline, all of those things, making one last desperate effort to think, if we do it well enough, the world will satisfy us. So these people, to a certain extent, are kind of more at the end than at the beginning of that cycle. If I get enough money, enough beautiful things, enough power in this world, then I will be happy. But we aren't. We're only happy when we understand where it comes from, where true happiness comes from. Which is why, and this is just the beginning of a revolution, a big revolution, that in the coming centuries, Swami often made a very interesting statement. He said, history will show that the most important thing happening in the world right now is Ananda. And he was not given to that kind of like, aren't we the saviors of the planet sort of people. When he would make a statement like that, he would make it very quietly. Just like Paramahansa Yogananda's autobiography of a yogi is one of the most influential books in terms of bringing people to a new understanding all over the planet, all these different languages. And people who begin to think, wait a minute, maybe just taking life as it's offered to me is not the way I really want to go. And they tend to find his book. And integral to that was a new way of living. If self-realization is your goal, if in fact we are part of a higher reality, if in fact there is a divine, loving mother who is taking care of us, how does that impact everything? Not just, oh, I'm going to have these ideas over here, but how can I make one decision without taking into account that reality? But it's very hard to stand against the thought form, what to speak of the social pressure and the expectations and the generational pulls and all of those things, to just plant yourself in a totally different reality. It's nice to have a little good company, just to hold you to the path, to tell you that you're not crazy, and also so that you don't have to make every single mistake yourself. You can watch your friends. Swami, or your friends can watch you. That's the other way that it works. I think sometimes some of the things I said to Swamiji, he was a great saint, if for no other reason than he put up with me. And I was so eager like this, and I actually remember, because I was school smart, and I was often school smart in a place where there wasn't much competition, I don't know how else to put it, so I looked bigger than I was. And I got the impression that I was bigger than I was. So the habit sort of being proud and not always supportive of others, no comments please, was a little deep in me. And I remember when I was in those early years with Swami, I could tell that I was struggling with this. And, I didn't want to be egotistical, so I said, Swami, the problem is that I often do things well. So maybe if I didn't do things so well, then the ego wouldn't be such a problem. That may have been the first time, but not the last, he said. That's the stupidest idea I've ever heard. Because we are made for greatness. But our confusion, very, very simple, our confusion is about the pronoun, I. What is the I that we're talking about? And I remember in those early years, Swamiji was trying, God bless him, he was trying so hard, please God bless him, trying so hard. He had this whole, this whole wormy mass of all of us young people who were extremely eager, but just didn't know what we were doing. And there was no context at all, but we were called. This founding generation, we were just called. And we were dedicated, and we were strong, and we were making it happen, but we were stupid, like on a cosmic scale, in terms of understanding the teachings. When Swami would talk in those days, he was 40 years old, not 80 like he was when some of you knew him. He just poured the energy out. His voice was strong, and he would talk fast, and he would give all these classes, and it was really like you could feel, in retrospect I see it, but even then you would feel he was just fighting this cosmic battle to purge us of all the wrong thoughts we had and bring us somewhere close to this, close to the center point that he had come to bring. And it worked. That's the most amazing thing. It really worked. And it has worked. Look at this. Look at what Ananda is. Look at all of the people who are drawn. And it's not everybody we can see, but it worked. Master planted it in him. He planted it in the ether. It moves, it moves, it moves. And how do you think you end up here? We don't end up here by our own, we're smarts here. There's this force of the masters calling us. And calling us not just individually, but calling whoever will listen to stop for just a moment and think about it. We're all going to die. This world is just going to disappear from us. What are we doing? Where are we going to, who are we going to be when we take off this body? And will we look back on this lifetime and say, well, wasted another one? Or will we be able to say that one was worth it? That was one I really wanted to live. And then Swamiji. Swamiji was prodigious in his creativity, just to an unreal extent. I feel that in all the years I knew him, which was 45 years, and I wasn't by his side by any means through all of that, but I knew him well, and I was in constant touch with him one way or another. I can hardly think of one day when he didn't do something creative and serviceful. He just never stopped. He would take an afternoon off so that he could start writing a new book in the evening. And then sometimes we'd have these satsangs, and sometimes he would come with a list of all the things that he did this week. I had to write all these songs for this, and then I had to write lyrics for that, and then I finished editing this book, and then I got out my photographs, and I made a slideshow out of them, and then we had this group come in, so I gave 5 classes for that group. And people in the room, some people who didn't stay in the room very long, said, oh, what an egotist. What an egotist. He's so egotistical. He just sits up there and talks about all he's done. But at the end of it, he would always say, and I just didn't know how I could do it, but I just put my attention at the point between the eyebrows, and I asked Master to show me, and it was there. You see, this is the fundamental misunderstanding, and this is what I was saying to Swami. I'll just do mediocre work, and that way I won't have to worry about my ego. He said you should do excellent work, and if it's not excellent, you should keep working until it is excellent. But wait, I'm not supposed to be, important. What am I supposed to be doing? And it all depends on that pronoun I. Am I doing it, my little brain, my special IQ, my special whatever it is? Or are we putting ourselves in tune with Divine Mother and saying, what would you like to have happen here? And how can I be your instrument? So the ego is not having an enormous amount of power, creativity, and energy and joy flowing through you. That's not ego. It's when we mistake that divine energy for something that belongs to me, just like this. It's what we identify, how we define ourselves. Master defined ego perfectly. He didn't say ego is the evil enemy that has to be stomped down. He said ego is the divine self mistakenly identified with limitation. And we all have to have an individuality. Well, at the end of Master's life, when Swamiji was with him and Master was editing the manuscript for his commentary on the Gita, Swami Kriyananda was a young man, and Master took him to be with him when he did the editing. Kriyananda had only been a monk with Master for a couple of months, and to be asked to go off with him in the seclusion to work on this book was out of proportion to Swami's seniority. And Master himself said, I prayed to Divine Mother and asked her who I should take with me, and your face popped up, he said. And just to be sure, I asked her a couple of more times. Which, of course, we always take that as Master saying to Divine Mother, are you sure? So Swami was there because Divine Mother wanted him to be there. And he said during the evenings, sometimes they would walk around the garden, and Master would sort of lean on Swami's arm. And then sometimes he said, Master would stumble like that. And Swami was there to keep him from falling. And Master said, sometimes I become so lost in the infinite that I forget which body I'm supposed to keep going. Now just think about for the minute. Wouldn't it be wonderful? Wouldn't it be wonderful to be so identified with our greater reality that we just forget the responsibilities for this little one? And this is, in fact, what happens to the masters. Master himself said in that same conversation, I can't tell whether I've eaten or not. I have to ask people whether I've eaten. The food has come into this body, but my consciousness is so expanded. But still Master lived in that body. Still Master worked through that body. Still his responsibilities were related to it. So there was a part of him that still identified, unless it forgot, with this limited reality, but he did not define himself by it. And as a consequence, that's what we're looking for. Because otherwise, we have to work through the instrument we have. We have to work through the karma that we have. We can't, and we have to work at the level of the divine. We can't just let the identification with this little body, oh, I feel a little sick, I feel a little unhappy. I mean, this is the battle. The constant battle is to identify and define ourselves with more than what holds us back. Swami, and it's necessary, even though Swami said he puts this attention at the point between the eyebrows and Master tells him what to do, it's not effortless for him. I was remembering Swami wrote the oratorio that we sing at Easter time. I was going to say, we're going to be singing it soon, but that's actually next April. The time gets a little weird here. But the oratorio, which we sing at Easter time, which is the life of Christ in music, Swami wrote it after a pilgrimage to Israel. And he was working on it, and during that time, where I was living was right next door to where he was living. And one night, during that time, I kept late hours. And it was about midnight, and Swami knew that we would be awake in our house. He phoned, and he asked me to come over. So I walked up 2 minutes over to where his house was, and he was working on the song that actually was about the crucifixion of Jesus, which became You Remain Our Friend. And you'll hear, we sing it every time at the festival. He put it into the Festival of Light later. And he had written out lyrics. He had the melody already, but he'd written out lyrics. And he showed them to me, and he wanted to know what I thought of them. Over the years, one learns to work with Swami's creativity. He definitely wants feedback. He doesn't want you to just shine him on. He wants to know what you think. That's why he's asking. But at the same time, you don't want to block his energy. Saying when he's trying to figure something out, if you just say no, he's not going to ask you again. It's just not helpful. I mean, you have to figure that out. So I'm looking at it, and it was good. There's nothing that he ever did that was actually bad. It was good, but it wasn't great. And so I thought to myself, and I said, well, Swamiji, not every song in the oratorio is going to be the best song in the oratorio, it just came to me in the moment. And he smiled at me and said, that's exactly what I wanted to know. I mean, he knew that I would be honest in some way. And then I went back again. The phone rings again at 5 in the morning. And I went over there again, and he showed me the words that he had now. Was he up all night? I don't know. So is that ego? What is that? That is, to be an instrument requires our commitment and requires our energy. And sometimes people say, well, I don't want to be egotistical. But what they're actually saying is, I don't want to put out the energy. I don't want to struggle through my delusions. I don't want to stand up and master my limitations. It's just easier to call that ego and not do it. And that's been centuries of religious life, which is that you do nothing. You wait to be told. Obedience, blind obedience even. But that is not self-realization. And today, Our affirmation is power, the power of the universe, set the world on fire. Swamiji would set his mind to things and then do everything he could to make it happen. And if in the last, Divine Mother didn't allow it, he could say with total satisfaction, I did my part. Once someone asked him, how do you know how to act? And he said, if there is something you can do to bring about the positive result you feel Divine Mother wants, you have a divine obligation to do it. And if you've done everything you can, and there's nothing left to do, then it's her story. It's her story all the way along, but it's our opportunity to be our instruments, her instrument, because the channel is blessed by that which flows through it. And if nothing much flows through it, the blessing is about the same. And if just a little bit, then I get tired, then I get bored, well, that's all right. That's why it takes so many incarnations. It's really super simple. It just takes lots and lots of incarnations. We don't change ourselves by making the decision to change ourselves. It's really, interestingly, much more subtle than that. The way we actually transform spiritually is we lose interest in ourselves. We just forget. It's so boring just to think about I, me, mine all the time. I, me, mine. What about me? What about me? What about me? There was a children's book, Charlotte's Web, I think, and there's some characters, I think maybe he's a rat or something. But whatever the character is, the line, the repeating line of that character is, what's in it for me, Charlotte? Swami would say that sometimes. What's in it for me, Charlotte? And it was so ludicrous when he would say something that took his consciousness like this. Swami was very dignified in his appearance. And he almost never wore any T-shirt or anything with a logo on it. But actually, David Praver had a restaurant in Colorado, in Denver, when Swami first met him, and David gave Swami this T-shirt from the restaurant. And out of respect for David, Swami used that for years as pajamas, because it was a very nice, soft T-shirt. And so every so often when you happen to go over there, and if he'd been meditating late or up late or whatever, he would still be in his pajamas. Swami was not formal at all with his friends. But you would see his consciousness committed to this restaurant. And you would go kind of like, what? It was just, the first time I saw it, it was just the oddest thing, until I realized that he was so committed to something so much larger. Just to even see something as silly as that, but it was dissonant. That's what real spiritual growth is. And it wasn't an affectation on his part or anything like that. It was his constant focus on very, very simple. Divine Mother, what can I do for you? What do you want done? And then put your mind at the spiritual eye, and then you just do it, and you work at it until it's up to her standards. And that commitment gradually changes us. We were talking last night, this community, this Sangha, has a very big job in front of us. We live on a beautiful piece of property that our generous and supportive friends have owned for 30 years. They don't want to own it anymore, but we still want to live there. So we have to find millions and millions of dollars. But we will. I believe that we will. We'll find it from banks, we'll find it from friends, we'll find it from Babaji going like that, because we will. Or we will, if in the end we don't, we will have made ourselves into gold for trying. And then we will be able to take that power to wherever Divine Mother wants to take us. It's not ego to say that. When Swami was in India in 1958, 59, he was trying to help build Yogananda's work, Master's work in India at that time. And at that time, it was like just 20 years less actually less than that. You know, India became an independent country. So it was like a decade into that. New Delhi was the heart of India at that time. Swami decided that Yogananda's work, Master's work, needed a temple in New Delhi because the whole country looked to New Delhi. And he just said, by the power of my will, I will make this happen. And everybody told him it couldn't be done. And he got right up. He got special permission from Nehru, got 25 acres donated in the center of the town by the Indian government for the building of this ashram. He said 2,000 religious societies had tried for that land and none of them got it. Swami Kriyananda got permission from Nehru to have that land. In the end, the door closed because he was working on behalf of the American Society and everything just tumbled down, which eventually led to Swami being separated from that organization, and now we're here. We never would have been here if that door hadn't slammed. But we would never have been here either if Swami hadn't done everything he could to get to that point. And that is not ego, do not misunderstand. But the power that moves us to try and compels us to try is because we do feel this limitation. I didn't understand when I was younger what it was that I was so desperate to change in my life. And I had lots of different words for it. But when I finally got to the spiritual path, almost immediately when I met Swami, I was 22 then. I started when I was 19 on this. I realized, the word is limitation. There's this feeling of immensity within us that's just held so tightly, and that's the ego. Because that immensity has persuaded itself that it's limited. And so what we have to do is we have to enlighten ourselves and realize that we're not. And as I was starting to say, it's not because then the ego decides to get rid of itself. It gets very complicated. It's the ego becomes so uninteresting. Yes, I will eat, and yes, I will move this body around, and I'll look in the mirror and try not to be an embarrassment to everyone like that, and I'll put on my nice clothes if I need to. But the point is, who cares? That's not who we are, and that's certainly not where our happiness comes from. Our happiness comes from that which flows through us. And when we dedicate ourselves to being as open a channel as we possibly can be for the greatest flow of that divine energy, that's bliss. That's where the bliss comes from. The ego is neither friend nor foe. It's just something that's part of the story. We just work with it, do our best with it, and then find ourselves where we truly belong, which is in the light of the divine. God bless you.
Dark eyes draw my heart away to where sun and moon sing. Soaring with the meadowlarks, love has made